Yes. Good morning, my friends. MikesMMAPicks here with your Fight Morning Quick Card Breakdown show brought to you by BetDSI as well as MMA Oddsbreaker. We are here for UFC Vegas 47, where we have Jack Hermansson taking on Sean Strickland in a middleweight bout that is scheduled for 5 rounds. We've got 13 fights on the docket today, 9 of which are favored to end inside the distance currently. Let's get things kicked off here with the first bout of the day, where we have Malcolm Gordon coming in after his win over Francisco Figueiredo, the brother of Davis and Figueiredo. I was tweeting last night that I would love to see Davis and Figueiredo avenge his brother's loss here, but not to be. We've got Danis-Bondar, a Ukrainian fighter, coming in as a minus 300 betting favorite against Malcolm Gordon, who's shown a propensity to get blown out of the water at times on the feet. Was the last fighter to the scale yesterday at weigh-ins, which was a bit concerning. At the lowest possible weight class in the UFC, you have a fighter who's coming in at 126 pounds. That was a concern. He's going to be carrying some extra weight against Bondar, who is a smaller flyweight. You watch the tape on Danis-Bondar, and he has a fairly well-rounded game. Has a bit of wrestling game to him. Will throw punches in bunches and is not afraid to go in for the kill. He is nicknamed the Psycho. In this spot, I see Danis-Bondar coming out, and potentially there is a situation here where he may end up getting overpowered. I was watching the tape on Bondar, and he seemed to progress through his footage from around 2016 all the way up until today. Liked what I saw in the transitions. I liked what I saw in the volume. And Malcolm Gordon, the glass chin, could be in play here again. And I think that you're looking around at different books, and I saw fight doesn't go the distance in the minus 160s. That may be a solid option for folks. Danis-Bondar opened at minus 240-ish and now is sitting at minus 300. So he's quite the heavy favorite here. I'll be picking Bondar. He's had some time to work on his game between his last fight and this fight. Significant stretch, to be honest. So still 30 years of age, I believe, 29 years of age. So still developing. I'll be picking Bondar in this matchup. Second fight of the night, where we have another fighter with a suspect chin, Jason Witt, who's under the tutelage of James Krause, who could be a potential X factor in many corners for many fighters. Jason Witt, heavy power wrestler who did not look good on the scales. This is another fighter who looked completely sucked out. Phil Rowe was one of the first fighters to the scale. Minus 140 for Phil Rowe. Jason Witt plus 110. I see a path to victory for Jason Witt is taking Phil Rowe to the mat and controlling him for the better part of 15 minutes. The problem is he's going to have to close distance against a guy who has a 10-inch reach. And you watch the fight against Orion, and Phil Rowe can crack, man. And he also is a pretty accurate striker when he has someone at range. And Jason Witt, I tweeted this last night, that he knows that there's a potential that he gets knocked out. So he's going to come in here and try and ground Jason Witt. I see that may happen. You know, there are no certainties in this game, but I think more than likely Phil Rowe is going to end up catching Jason Witt in this fight at some point. And one play you may want to look at, the scorecards, no action on Phil Rowe. That's something that's been hanging out there. If you're concerned that Jason Witt could come out here and grind a decision win, but Witt did not look good on the scales, and he has been finished many, many times. Phil Rowe also not a he's has grappling, he has jiu-jitsu, but as far as his takedown defense, that is still a major concern. So give me Phil Rowe in this spot. Good morning, Warden. Thank you for getting in here early today. Realize it is fight morning. It is early. Oh, look at this. Moyes says that Gordon's going to quit in the first round. That is always a possibility. We saw against the Muderji fight. In the Muderji fight, he got clipped and just shelled up. It was a very strange ending. Good morning, Daniel. Welcome aboard. Let's get to this third fight of the day, where we have Danilo Marques taking on Jailton Almeida. Almeida coming in as a massive favorite here. This is a spot where he's receiving that Contender Series rub, but he does have a legitimate record to speak of. And Marques, we saw against Mike Rodriguez, a lot of people wrote him off in that spot. He hung around. Damian Maia has spent a lot of time with this guy, and I believe he's also been at Kings for a while. He's a tough guy, man. The Kennedy Njoku fight, he almost had him out of there. Marques, I have concerns about him running out of gas. He seems to gas out in many of his fights. If he's not able to land a submission, that's always a possibility here. I'll be picking Almeida, though. I don't like the minus 430 line. I think you'd be better off looking for an inside the distance prop there. This fight's not expected to go to a decision, and actually the fight doesn't go the distance. Prop has shortened over the past few days to a point where it's almost playable. It's in the minus 200s. So I'll be picking Almeida and Almeida to win inside the distance there. Next up, we have Alligator Alexis Davis coming in as a minus 250 betting favorite. And she has a bit of a resurgence that we've seen recently. Has a few edges in this spot against Yulia Stoliarenko. Stoliarenko plus 200 underdog. It amazes me how this fight is booked, to be honest, on this card. Women's MMA hasn't made the progressions that we've... there's such a discrepancy between the higher echelon fighters and the low-level fighters. Alexis Davis is a veteran of the game, and she's still able to put it on these young fighters who really have no business being in the UFC. And I think Stoliarenko is one of those fighters. There's always a chance Alexis Davis falls off a cliff at some point in her career. I don't think Stoliarenko is the fighter to do that, though. I typically have stayed away from making plays on women's MMA fights. There's a very high variance out there. Head and arm throws are effective in this day and age. It's incredible. Alexis Davis, though, should pull this one out. I'll be picking Alexis Davis in that matchup. Next up, where we have Marc-Andre Barriault coming in as a minus 125 betting favorite. This line is pretty close against Chiji Njokuani. Njokuani had a significant run at Bellator where he found himself in some high-level matchups. Phenomenal striker, still 33 years of age, coming in against a Barriault who has seemingly turned the corner here. Canadian fighter who is tough as nails, tough to finish. Chidi, you're going to look for him to land something spectacular to take Barriault out of there. That's the way he gets this fight done. The thing is, Barriault is tough as nails, and he's been in there with some some strong competition as well. Barriault, the longer this fight goes, second, third round, that's when he seems to put it on his opponents and pull away. I'm slightly leaning Barriault in this matchup. I think that Chidi, if he's able to work in space, that's when he's going to cause Barriault some trouble. But he might not have that space because Barriault likes to fight and get into striking exchanges in a phone booth. So give me Barriault in this matchup. No play on the fight, though. Next up, where we have Hakeem Dawodu taking on Marques-Almeida. Dawodu, last time out, we saw him finding some success at the end of his fight against Evloev. Completely blanketed for 2.5 rounds. And you saw, I believe this fight took place in Phoenix. You saw Dawodu just so frustrated, getting completely controlled. His corner had no answer whatsoever. Marques-Almeida isn't an elite grappler, but he is a game opponent and is more well-rounded than Dawodu. Dawodu is a striker by trade, has solid cardio and volume, and that's what's helped him out in the past in many of his matchups. This spot, I think Trizano is a game opponent here, somebody who's going to bring the fight out of Dawodu, and he should be there when this final bell tolls. You look at the fight goes the distance line, it was sitting at -195. Very rare to see a men's featherweight bout with a goes the distance line at -200, especially when you have some strikers here who are going to look to exchange. I'm going to be rolling with Marques-Almeida here. New Jersey's own seems to be coming together, had some time away from the cage, could come out here and cause Dawodu some issues. I like the striking defense of Trizano, and he's a gamer. Dawodu mean mugs, and he looks to draw opponents into his strengths, which I don't blame him for doing that, but Dawodu's been in some trouble in previous fights on the feet as well. I'll be picking Trizano to win. Let's see. Oh, Jordan, welcome aboard, sir. Let's see what we got here. Miles Johns taking on Johns-Castaneda. Miles Johns coming in as a -180 favorite. This line has closed. A lot of people hopped on Castaneda earlier in the week, and when these lines opened, Castaneda could have been had in the the +200 region. Castaneda has a path to victory here. It's volume. It's extending Miles Johns, who is going to, Miles Johns is a very interesting fighter. He is somebody who seems to be falling in love with his power. He's a wrestler by trade, fighting out of Fortis MMA. And I think this has to be said. Fortis MMA has had a number of fighters who have struggled with their weight cuts. You have Steven Peterson, Carlos Diego Ferreira, Macy Chason. there have been a bunch of fighters who really, I'm not sure what's going on over there with the issues on the scale, though. Miles Johns did make weight. Peterson, we're going to talk about him in a little while. So Miles Johns has the wrestling. He's going to have to control Castaneda, which is tough to do. Castaneda is a volume striker who will not go away. And that's his path to victory here for Castaneda. To pour it on Miles Johns, make him uncomfortable. You may hear Fortis Corner say, turn and burn at some point during the fight. No, not much confidence whatsoever in this pick, but I'll be picking Miles Johns in this spot. There are warts in his game which are concerning. And you watched Castaneda's fight against Rojo in Combate. This kid does not go away, man. Even against Nathaniel Wood, he was outmatched and just kept coming forward. And that's what could potentially cause Miles Johns some problems here. I'll be picking Miles Johns, though, in this spot. Now, we were talking about Fortis MMA fighters, and we have Steven Peterson, who had an egregious weight miss where he came in at, I believe, 149 pounds for a fight against Julian Erosa, who's coming in as a minus 300 betting favorite. Erosa is coming into his own the past few fights. If he is not knocked unconscious, he's a solid fighter. He has length, volume, grappling, cardio, doesn't throw for power, but he will engage in firefights, and that's what's caused him problems in the past. But it's a double-edged sword for him, because the Nate Landwehr fight, he was able to really show us that he's capable of landing that flying knee and ending things in a spectacular fashion. Against Choi, he got blown out of the water. Devontae Smith, we saw him get completely taken out. In a way, I'm going to say this. I'm going to come out and say this, but I really think that his career resurgence is somewhat reminiscent of Alistair Overeem's resurgence, in that he's been able to fight to his strengths and really thread a needle in some spots. Against Steven Peterson, Peterson's outmatched in many facets of this fight. He's going to be at a big-time reach disadvantage. He's going to be at a volume disadvantage. He's going to be at a grappling disadvantage. He does have the extra weight. He is going to have to clip Julian Erosa to win this fight, and I don't see that happening very often. One thing that I did notice during the face-offs was that Steven Peterson and Julian Erosa engaged in some sort of heated conversation. I realized that Erosa handpicked Steven Peterson in this spot. And I mean, you look at the line, blown up to minus 300. So I'll be picking Erosa in this spot. I think there is always the chance that Erosa gets clipped here, but he is the deserved favorite in this spot and should win this fight. So I'll be picking Julian Erosa. Next up, where we have Brian Battle taking on Tresean Gore. Tresean Gore coming in as a minus 145 betting favorite, taking on Battle, who this line's closed here. You have Battle was a significant dog at one point. The first time this fight was about to happen, everybody had their hands up saying that Tresean Gore was going to dismantle Brian Battle. Battle seems to be growing into his frame, is a crafty fighter who really fights like a veteran out there when you watch him. He has a will to win. Tresean Gore, we know he does as well, but Gore fights to his strengths. He has some wrestling to speak of, tough as nails, cardio. But one thing I noticed is that when he gets caught at range, he recognizes when he's in trouble and when he's making mistakes, and then he'll change levels and going for a takedown. I think Battle could pose some problems for Gore, both at range and when these two clinch up. Battle is very crafty on the mat. He has submissions, and I think that Gore is being a bit overrated in this matchup. I'll be picking Brian Battle here. I think that I think that this fight should be evens, to be honest, if you look at the line. I'll be picking Battle, though. I think that the longer this fight goes, the tide's going to turn and Battle is going to really come on late. Tresean Gore, we haven't seen. He hasn't been very active, although he has an amateur career that's dated back to 2014. He does lack some professional experience here. So give me Brian Battle. Both of these fighters are young and developing and should be a great fight. One that we've waited for quite some time. Next up, where we have Sam Alvey as a massive dog here, plus 315 underdog, taking on Brendan Allen, 435, minus 435 favorite, coming off of a brutal knockout loss to Chris Curtis. Interesting fight where, believe it or not, this is the third time that he's run into someone related to Sean Strickland and their camp. Sean Strickland, Chris Curtis, and now Sam Alvey. Brendan Allen has that well-documented history with Sean Strickland, took that fight on short notice and got annihilated. Brendan Allen did, and wanted to avenge that loss, was unable to do so. Didn't get that rematch. Took on Chris Curtis. He didn't have anything for Curtis after he wasn't able to land that takedown, and that's a concern here. You have Sam Alvey, who is one of the most predictable fighters. If you're talking about preparing for somebody, Eric Anders and Sam Alvey are the two most predictable fighters in the UFC as far as I'm concerned. And Alvey, I'm very shocked that he's still hanging around at this stage in his career, coming off 6 losses in a row and a draw mixed in there as well. Alvey's going to have to rely on landing that one shot to take Brendan Allen out of there, because Allen has... The problem is Alvey has great takedown defense. It's held up. Wellington Turman was able to take him down a couple of times, but Brendan Allen doesn't have the same type of takedowns that Wellington Turman does. Brendan Allen should win this fight, but I'm not going anywhere near that minus 435 betting line. I think that this is a tricky fight because Alvey is typically a survivor, and it should get sketchy at some point. I'll be picking Allen to win. I think that if he does win this fight, I could see him getting on Alvey's back while Alvey's standing and locking in a rear naked choke at some point. I can see Alvey grimacing and tapping to something. So give me Allen winning by submission. I see him locking in something while Alvey's standing. I'm just having a premonition here. Let's see how this one plays out, though, my friends. That's why they make the fights, right? Wow. Now, this is the litmus test that we've been waiting for Shavkat Rakhmonov taking on Carlston-Harris, who's coming in as a plus 190 underdog. Harris he's been flying under the radar for a few fights here. Harris is the real deal. Gets a lot of torque on his strikes. Is a very long striker. Could have ended the fight against Impa Kasanganay a few times, and I was very, very impressed with Carlston-Harris. And the thing is, Harris is he has a lot to his game too. He can grapple, he can wrestle, and Rakhmonov. It almost seems like, the Michel Prazeres fight, he was ragdolling Prazeres, who shouldn't be at that weight class. He's been popped for steroids and is now gone from the promotion. But Rakhmonov is a stone cold killer out there, and I want to see how this fight unfolds. I think that Harris is a bit of a wild card in this matchup because he believes in himself and he has legitimate skills, and he's a dangerous opponent for just about anybody at this division. Rakhmonov's going to have to, he's going to have to mind his P's and Q's here. Rakhmonov, I was impressed with his win over Alex Oliveira, but Alex Oliveira, we've seen him quit in previous fights, and there's the potential for him to do so again. Let's see. We'll get back to that comment in a minute, Mr. Brown. Yeah, so Shavkat Rakhmonov, I think this is a great fight for everyone to sit back and watch how it unfolds, because we are not, we haven't seen the total game of Rakhmonov. This fight, both of these fighters, well, you look, Rakhmonov is a relatively young fighter, and then you have Harris, we know who he is. He's a dangerous opponent, 34 years of age. He's in his prime right now. I believe this is a big step up of competition for Rakhmonov, and I want to see how he handles it. It's a litmus test. I'll be picking Rakhmonov in that matchup, but I have some concerns here. We haven't seen Rakhmonov fighting off of his back or getting extended in fights. And one of my quotes that I have is, you can't trust what you haven't seen. So has he overcome adversity? We haven't seen that happen that often. All right, let's get back to the chat here. I saw something that popped up here. 1 second, my friends. All right. Allen has been saying he was winning the Strickland and Curtis fights until he got caught, which he clearly wasn't. Definitely staying away from it, -400. Yes, great idea to stay away from that line. Interesting, too, he kept getting caught by the same punch and continued to make the same mistakes over and over again. Gabe's in the house talking about Castaneda here. Sexy Mexi. He's a live dog, man. That line is coming in, as we've seen. So we'll see how that one plays out. Now let's get to the co-main event of the evening. It's incredible to consider that this is the co-main event of the evening, where we have Puna Soriano taking on Nick Maximov. Nick Maximov as a plus 155 underdog. This is another situation where you have not seen much of Maximov trading on the feet. He does not look like he can compete with Soriano on the feet. But if this fight hits the mat, it's a different story. Soriano, though, has a background in wrestling and is pretty stout, his takedown defense at least. So Maximov's going to have to get tricky here and be unpredictable to take Soriano down. Closing the distance, he could end up getting caught by a shovel uppercut. Maximov, I was surprised he had a bit of a size edge in the stare down at the face-offs. And Maximov, I have concerns about the gas tank. I have concerns about the gas tank of both of these fighters, though Soriano has been fighting out of a legitimate camp. And Maximov, we know, trains with the jiu-jitsu, with the Diaz brothers, who specialize in boxing and jiu-jitsu, but we haven't seen much of Maximov's boxing. The last time out, getting extended, you want to watch visual evidence of someone running on fumes? Look at Maximov's last fight. Barely pulled that one out. And you don't want to be caught in a situation where the ref stands you up late in the fight and you're forced to exchange when you have nothing left. Soriano is not one of those fighters you want to get caught in a situation with. Soriano, interesting though. You look at Brendan Allen's career, and somehow he had that magnificent performance against Soriano from a stand-up perspective. Then he gets clipped by Chris Curtis, and now everybody's questioning Brendan Allen. Granted, he did have that loss to Sean Strickland as well, but Soriano came in here, took a clear loss to Brendan Allen. And where does he stand here? Soriano, he was Pihota, Todorovic, those are guys who have had poor striking defense, fought with their hands down at times. Soriano is not one of the fighters who you want to get in there with and keep your hands down. This fight, Maximov is a threat on the mat, and it's a pretty binary fight when you look at it. The problem is, how is Maximov going to get this fight to the mat? Is he going to try to push Soriano against the cage, get a hold of him, drag him to the mat? Well, I've been impressed with Maximov's transitions. That's something that really impresses me. The way he's been able to transition, very seamless. Can also chain submissions together, but he's going to have to get Soriano to the mat, which I think is going to be a tall task. I'll be picking Puna Soriano in this matchup, and I'll be watching this one from a distance. Main event of the evening. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today on this fight morning, UFC Vegas 47, where we have Sean Strickland coming in as a minus 215 betting favorite, taking on Jack Hermansson, plus 175 underdog. What's interesting to me, not many folks are mentioning the Shabazian fight when you listen to breakdowns out there. Wasn't too long ago that Jack Hermansson found himself facing some serious adversity against Edmund Shabazian. And Sean Strickland, if he's able to keep this fight on the feet, which Hermansson should sell out and go for takedowns here. Hermansson's very dangerous early in fights. Sean Strickland has there's almost I don't know if it's an enigma. There's this aura about his ground game that we haven't seen much of it. We saw against Brendan Allen. He wasn't, showed no fear going into Allen's guard and actually looked competent and ready to kick some ass down there. So Strickland, one of my favorite fighters to watch. He has volume, tough as nails. You talk about falling in love with being in the fire. This is someone who has done that. Hermansson is a fighter who will fight hard for your money, no doubt. Watch the Tylis Litis fight. The Litis fight, he was able to overcome adversity in that bout. You talk about fighters who will fight hard for your money. Both of these fighters will. I think I gave out a free play when maybe about a couple of weeks ago, we posted it and had a breakdown out there. The pick was Sean Strickland at minus 188. And this line has ballooned up to minus 215. If this fight gets extended, I have concerns for Jack Hermansson. You watch his previous bouts, the Vettori fight. I'm not going to say he's brittle, but he seemed to have put on some mass in his camps, and he's looking to bulk up here. I think that he's trying to implement a grappling heavy game plan against Sean Strickland. That is his path to victory. Though the longer this fight goes, I think that Sean Strickland should run away with it. Let's see. Brown says he's keen to see how good Strickland's grappling is. Heard heaps about hype. Yes. Well, he has been training with Chimaev. So I've also heard, what's interesting. You hear about Magomed Ankalaev. There's been other fighters who Strickland has spent significant time with, and some fighters, this is where they grow is in the gym. Joe says that he likes Joker by sub round 2. Okay. I could see it round one. I think that if it hits the second round, we should see Sean Strickland really find his range. And he's almost like a computer out there gaining intelligence during the first couple of rounds. And then he has his opponent figured out. The UFC put out a stat yesterday that Sean Strickland's defensive striking is up there with some of the best in the division, but then you also have to consider the opponents that he's facing. Some fighters' stats are a little suspect if they aren't fighting great competition. Strength of schedule. Morning, Rocket. Great to see you. So, interesting main event. I'll be picking Sean Strickland in this fight. I think that his pedigree, him moving up from 170 pounds, has been a success. Granted, he did have that horrific knee injury and leg injury after the motorcycle accident. We haven't really seen any issues with that. I'm surprised no one's really targeted that leg in the fight, and hasn't come back to haunt him, at least yet. A concern of mine is Sean Strickland. I don't know if he's overtraining or not. That's the other thing. He seems to be busting his ass in the gym. You watch I don't want to put too much stock into it, but you watch the clips that have been posted. He's in there trading leather with Dom Reyes, and they weren't really pulling punches that much. It looked like some of those were landing on the button a week out from the fight. So concerning. But Sean Strickland's going to be the pick. I liked him at -188. Now he's up to -215. Just a couple of things. You can check out my third-party tracked record at betmma.tips. Transparent as always. My MMA Oddsbreaker premium plays are posted, and third-party tracked long-term winner. Trust where you get your advice. Follow long-term winners. Look out for folks who put the cart before the horse and start pushing out picks before they're even in the green. I want to wish everybody a phenomenal fight day, and remember to go get what's yours. Let's do this, my friends. It's your time.